Welcome, everybody. My name is Nilda Cosco. I'm the Director of Programs at the Natural Learning Initiative, a unit associated with the Department of Landscape Architecture at the College of Design, North Carolina State University. This webinar is a result of recognizing the big need to know how to use the outdoors in childcare settings or settings used by young children in times of COVID-19. When the information is scarce, when the information about the disease is limited, and when guidance changes rapidly according to the emerging new knowledge. So we took the opportunity to explore the topic with colleagues who are committed to offering high quality outdoor experiences for young children, especially for those living under hard circumstances and suffering stress. For this webinar, the Natural Learning Initiative is partnering with organizations actively supporting outdoor play for young children. We will hear short presentations by Robin Moore, the Director of the Natural Learning Initiative, Rich Rary, the Director of Be Active Kids, Lori Pugh, the Senior Management at the North Carolina Division of Child Development and Early Learning. And we will have also in the panel Leah Rucker, State Anchor for North Carolina Rated License Assessment Project, and Alison Kisler, Policy and Planning Program Manager at DCD, that will join us at the end in the segment of Q&A at the end of this presentation. So the goals of the session are to emphasize, of course, the value of outdoor play and contact with nature, and to explore ways to support childcare providers feel secure taking children outdoors. So we are here to share what we know up to now, and this is important, up to now, to share temporary guidance and creative ideas to make the most of the outdoors as a healthy environment for children and for all. We are also open to hear your reactions and ideas, because we are in this together to serve children. So please add your questions in the Q&A box in the bottom bar of the page, and we will engage in a conversation at the end of the session. I just want to start stressing that we live in an interconnected world where the health of humankind, all living things, animals, insects, microbes, and the environment, the biosphere that envelops us, water, air, sun, is interwoven in a single, interdependent, diverse system. And this is very important. Today, diversity is what makes us healthy and allows us to thrive. Research has shown, without doubt, the health benefits of being outdoors, that perhaps we have taken for granted in the past, but appears critical right now. And I'm going to go over just some findings that are very relevant today. It supports being outdoors, supports physical activity that helps reduce anxiety and inflammatory processes, boosts the immune system by being in touch with soil and natural materials, and therefore reduces allergies and asthma incidences, alleviates stress. Even the views of trees can help reduce anxiety, supports attention functioning. We know that even 20 minutes of walk in the park or a natural setting will enhance the ability of children to focus. All this is more important now than ever. We also have some new promising research about COVID-19 and the potential impact in the outdoors. And we say promising because all of this is in the make as I speak. The evidence and findings of this research will guide our future decisions. I want to acknowledge here the contributions of Daniel Jost, that is a PhD candidate working at the Natural Learning Initiative, for his effort to compile the latest research as it's coming. So lab research in controlled environment is showing that sunlight inactivates the virus in non-porous surfaces. The research was done in stainless steel, and it inactivates the virus in about 7 to 15 minutes, depending on the medium. Imagine that. The study, as the researchers say, provides the first evidence that sunlight may rapidly inactivate the virus on surfaces, suggesting that exposure to risk may vary significantly between the indoors and the outdoor environment. Additionally, these data indicate that natural sunlight may be effective as a disinfectant for contaminated non-porous materials. Airborne droplets or particles in the air are also deactivated by sunlight in combination with higher temperature and humidity. There is even now a solar deactivation calculator that can be accessed online that takes into consideration the mix of temperature, humidity, and sunlight. I was thinking maybe we in the east of the US will start to appreciate our hot and humid summers, maybe. Research also shows that the virus is unstable in water. Unfortunately, there is no evidence of transmission via food. Now, we want to stress that because most of the COVID-19 transmission is via the droplets, by talking, coughing, laughing, singing, it's very good to recommend the use of a mask. These findings, along with what we have already known about the effect of the outdoors and the contact with nature, make outside active living more relevant than ever. And there is much that design can do to support the use of these healthy environments. Robin Moore will help us understand a bit more. Thank you. Robin?
Thanks, Nilda. Please post questions to the Q&A as we go. At NLI, we study how site design influences child and adult behavior to help us inform design thinking and predict intended behavioral outcomes. The goal is to increase physical diversity to support a wide range of play and learning activities across communities of diverse kids so that children and teachers are never short of things to do each day. A while ago, NLI conducted a behavior mapping study of 30 childcare center outdoor environments in North Carolina to help answer these built environment design questions. This sample of research sites reflects their broad range of variability, including a trio of NLI design renovation designs. Site-level form variables influence possible design choices, including site shape, size in relation to center enrollment, and subdivision by age group, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and school-age kids. Indoor-outdoor connections are important, especially whether or not classrooms open directly outdoors. The number and range of activity settings is crucial. More on that in a moment. Finally, consider shade, if there is some. We would say small scattered patches are preferable to a few large blobs. In this example, 12 activity settings were measured. Activity setting 11 in the upper left is a shady grove of pre-existing pine trees with pine needles that attract lots of ground surface play. Setting 5 in the center is a small circular path popular for wheeled toy activity. Setting 2 to the right is a typical anchored play climber surrounded by wood mulch safety surface. Setting 4 at the top is a small, well-used playhouse. Setting 12 in the bottom left is a pathway bordered by lawn used by a teacher for loose parts play. As you see, this site exemplifies clustering by children attracted by individual activity settings, as well as dispersed activity by children moving between them, usually engaged in free-form, make it up as you go, synergetic play. The second site, in contrast, this common type of low diversity site lacks well-defined settings. Activity is more uniformly dispersed without the play synergy stimulated by the form and content of the other site. These additional examples demonstrate how varied shapes, sizes, indoor-outdoor spatial relations, shade, and diversity of activity play settings influence activity patterns. From what we understand about preschool outdoor behavioral protocols during COVID-19, there's a strong emphasis on group structure, which means that clustering around activity settings may become a useful management approach. We assume that social distancing with children under 5 is not a feasible option. Published results focused on physical activity and health promotion that show adjacency, that is the number of activity settings touching each other, and setting centrality increase physical activity. Larger sites are associated with less activity, more likely because there's less interaction between more dispersed children. On the other hand, larger activity settings are associated with higher levels of activity, most likely because there's more capacity. Playful synergy between children is further increased by portable play equipment, such as balls and wheeled toys on looping pathways. In other words, types and distribution of activity are influenced by spatial form and content, factors that can be manipulated through design, environmental management, and activity programming. Physical diversity, which Nola emphasized greatly, can be measured at site level as at a safe place enrichment center here in Raleigh, the thematic image for this webinar. Natural fixed components include this perennial border, trees, shrubs, vines, and ground covers, as well as settings such as this gathering space created from semi-buried upright logs. Natural loose components include harvested plant parts, ground surfaces that children pick from, small animals, anything that's interactive and manipulable, such as this pollinator garden against the back fence that attracts lots of children, teachers, and flying insects. Manufactured fixed components like play equipment and this shady outdoor classroom, considered a manufactured item even though custom built on site, with a stage deck that stimulates synergy by facing the gathering space. Lastly, manufactured loose movable components, which include portable play equipment such as wheeled toys, sand play toys, recycled and repurposed items, and loose parts in general. Included also are movable site furnishings, as on the stage deck and table in the foreground. This bird bath setting includes manufactured fixed item itself, surrounded by natural fixed planting. The NRLI best practice indicator for diversity is 10 settings or more. Here, there's 7 settings in just one of 2 sections of the preschool outdoor area. In addition, standalone components include a mature shade-giving pine tree that was there long before the childcare center, and an interesting repurposed doorway separating the 2 sections. Movable is your best friend. Compare the previous level of best practice diversity with this example of commonplace environments found in the majority of preschool outdoor play spaces before renovation, containing composite play equipment surrounded by wood mulch, in turn surrounded by mown grass, not really designed as an activity setting. In the background, there's a nice covered sandplay setting, and beyond that, an outdoor classroom overlooking the woods. Basically, that's 4 fixed manufactured activity settings with 2 plastic animals possibly considered as additional components. In summary, the size and configuration of sites and diversity of physical content can make a difference to their play and learning potential and provide possibilities for classroom group management and activity programming. For sites like this, a COVID-19 management strategy could be to increase movable components and loose parts. Let me pass the baton to Rich Rary to talk more about a programming approach to outdoor management.
Thanks, Robin. As we think about meeting physical activity best practices in outdoor settings, I'd like to expand on the form and context variables that Robin just mentioned and how programming can play a role. The physical environment affords children with so many beneficial opportunities to move and learn. If we look at children's active play as a continuum or spectrum, we will see that outdoor play can be sedentary all the way to vigorously active. It can be mostly child-directed all the way to adult-led. Throughout this continuum or spectrum of play, both children and adults utilize the environment, the task being or activity being set for them, and the bodies and minds differently and in different ways. As we deal with the new normal around COVID-19 or plan for future challenges, it is important to remember the physical health needs of our children. On a positive note, we have seen and heard from many centers and homes that have taken this time to spend quality opportunities together with their children outdoors. We've seen and heard about more walking, hiking, bear hunts. If you're not familiar with those are neighborhoods putting bears in the windows for kids to spot as they go on daily walks. We've seen more bike riding, backyard and driveway games, and exercising together outdoors. So communities are also taking this approach to getting outdoors. This is truly a blessing. Children need to use play and physical activity as not just a means of exercise for their current and future health, but as a means to develop fundamental motor skills, to cope with stress, to relieve energy in order to focus, and so much more. We as adults are the gatekeepers for many of the active play experiences. We can be both inactive and passive in our role and or active and engaged. This is how we navigate through the next continuum or spectrum. If we look at an active or passive role, next slide, we can begin to see how teachers may play a role in creating a safe and developmentally appropriate setting for young children so that they can grow, develop, and learn. But a lot of times in an inactive or passive role, we still have to be active in our pre-class thinking or short and long-term planning so that we can be prepared, so that we can set up the opportunities and forward the opportunities for young children. We also take a look at management and instruction as topics including time, space, people, and equipment. This is very similar to what Robin just discussed as we related to the outdoor learning environment. In order to follow COVID-related recommendations and keep our children as safe as possible, let's consider how we manage the time our children spend in active outdoor play and the spaces in which they spend that time. Do we add more time for outdoor play so that we're in the sun, fresh air, and larger outdoor spaces? Maybe a good start. So learning can take place indoors or outdoors, but outdoors, as Nilda suggested, allows for a lot more opportunity to be safe. Do we alter the time or vary the time in which different groups of children play outdoors? That also may be a strategy as well. Maybe alternating classes as they come out or having smaller groups within those classes come out at different times. Do we vary the times at settings so that maybe certain children play on the fixed equipment while others play in the sandbox or natural areas? Switching often or maybe even staying consistent in those. Outdoor time and the time spent in both child-directed and adult-led active play opportunities will need to be discussed and planned for. Using the space available to allow for some social distancing can be helpful, but also thinking about how to manage the number of children in those spaces so that there can be an effective amount of social distancing as needed, but also to help keep group sizes smaller as a means of not spreading COVID-19 to the whole class. This limiting of children in spaces also can allow more opportunity for adult-child interactions and experiences. Think about large classes. Trying to do something with a large class, more difficult. But if you can go one-on-one with a child while they're playing, you can begin to be invited into their play experience. Another area of planning and management is thinking about the types of equipment or loose parts we provide. What is the purpose of the activity being asked? What is the needed equipment or loose part to aid in that activity for its success? If you want them to work on cardiovascular endurance, no real additional equipment may be needed. If you want them to have experience and develop manipulative skills like throwing, catching, kicking, striking, etc., then you may need some type of equipment or loose part. But then how much equipment or loose parts do you provide? How and when do you disinfect that equipment? Do we remove or eliminate equipment that may be shared with others, like touching balls? It's extremely likely that if you eliminate equipment based on the possible risk, you may lead children to a frustrating and less active experience that may lead to more rough and tumble play, which involves more physical touch. Think about and plan for what types of equipment and loose parts you will provide, how much of the equipment you will provide, how and when you will make it available, and how you will share it with other children and how they will share it amongst themselves. Will you distance it or separate it between groups in the class or classes themselves? And then lastly, how will you disinfect that? Consider the concept of maximum individual participation. If you have one ball for 4 children, how much practice or play opportunities will each child receive? How often will they share that ball? If we had 4 balls for 4 children, each child would have their own ball, keep it to themselves to reduce sharing and increase practice, play, success, and enjoyment. Think about each group in a class having their own equipment or each class having their own equipment. These are just strategies to consider when planning for and providing a quality environment and experience for children. But as we become more active and engaged, attempting to accomplish possible learning objectives, we can consider the same 4 topics: time, space, people, and equipment, but as it relates to more adult-led experiences. Leading activities allows for a bit more control over actions so as to keep children busy, happy, and good, while allowing them more control over social distancing and shared use of equipment. Next slide. Actually, go back one. Sorry about that. Modifying the time children listen to and attempt to follow the adult relies on ability to read the child, their focus, and their success, but also allows for understanding of their failure, their frustration, and their boredom. Shorter adult-led activities tend to be better for these things. Doing them more often allows for repetition and variety throughout the day while helping them learn with their learning and development. Think about the number and grouping of children you are leading. Try to vary from whole group to individual activity. Consider the child and group spacing while they are doing the activities. Spread them out, give them plenty of room, not only due to COVID, but also due to typical skill and management. Consider doing more individual instruction as you walk around the outdoor learning environment. Work with one child at a time. Provide direct instruction, feedback, and physical guidance as appropriate. And lastly, consider what types of activities or purpose of those activities, and if equipment is even needed. Can you work on a locomotor skill such as creeping, crawling, walking, running, gliding, galloping, without any equipment at all? Or vary how you perform those locomotor actions using movement concepts, such as under, around, slow, fast, bound, free, high, low, and more. This will allow for much more activity and many more play opportunities without relying on equipment at all. If we do use equipment in adult-led activities, think back to MIP, maximum individual participation. Think about limiting partner activities. Think about using disposable loose parts and natural items, such as paper balls, pine cones, rocks, and sticks. Think about equipment that can be washed or disinfected often between groups and classes. Next slide. Now that we've discussed the adult's role in play, setting up and leading activities for young children, it's now time to think about the other end of the play spectrum, that child-directed play. Movement is the heart of children's active lives as they acquire their autonomy in different daily life situations. Once we have set up a safe and developmentally appropriate environment, it is now time to sit back, watch, and facilitate the children's experiences and overall development. I wish it was that easy, right? First thing, think about their affective development. Things like socialization, teamwork, cooperation, and sharing, along with their self-concept and self-esteem. This can be a stressful time for both adults and children, and ensuring that their active play experiences are fun and beneficial allow for them to release energy and reduce some of the stress and anxiety. Let's not make it work. Let's not remove all of the enjoyment or reward just because there is a risk. Be creative. Knowing about the risks and how to navigate around them while following safety requirements and recommendations is extremely important, but so is being creative and thinking a bit outside the box about how our children can build resilience, get some physical activity, and learn a few things in an active and playful way. It is through motor exploration that children's self-awareness and awareness of the outside world arises. Second area, motor experiences are a vital condition for adaptation in a child's didactic learning and can stimulate thinking. Assist children by providing them with variety along with repetition. Allow outdoor play to stimulate their cognitive development. Provide a variety of equipment, a variety of play settings, and a variety of social interactions. Find ways to allow for decision-making. Provide novel experiences that cause a bit of wonder and excitement, but also a little challenge and eustress or positive stress. Variety in practice is extremely helpful in motor skills learning and development. It allows for better mastery of skill, which in turn leads to greater success and enjoyment for longer lasting involvement throughout our lives. Think about integrating academic concepts or learning topics into their active play. Making connections helps reinforce learning and development. Lastly, children need the time, space, and equipment to participate in the development of motor skills and movement concepts. The progressive acquisition of skills concerns both mental and motor activities is defined as psychomotor development. With limited opportunities outside of childcare and home for children to engage in motor skills learning and practice, like recreational programs, this seems like a great time to enhance those opportunities in childcare. Also, think about opportunities to focus on health-related fitness, not just as a means of lowering body mass index or reducing weight, but also as a means of increasing flexibility and range of motion, as a means of improving cardiovascular endurance, as a means of improving our muscle strength and endurance. Enhancing children's health-related fitness can help strengthen their body systems in order to fight off infection and aid in recovery of that infection. Also, consider the opportunity we provide for children. Are we allowing for them to engage in some risky behaviors, such as activities that involve in heights and higher speeds? Are we allowing them to engage in rough and tumble play? Why or why not? Social distancing and limiting contact is a clear recommendation, but is it a doable option for young children in childcare settings? Now that we have discussed both the adult role and the child's role in outdoor play and the needs to provide children with both child-directed opportunities and adult-led activities, Let's think through a few scenarios. Next slide. Let's put what we just talked about in practice. When I ask a question, if you want to answer some questions, when I ask them, put your responses in the chat box. Let's say we want a little more control and we decide to lead an activity with children like Blues Toss and Catch. This activity is mainly for toddlers and twos, and it starts with having them toss a ball overhead with 2 hands, then toss a ball underhand with 2 hands, then moves into catching. Someone drops a ball from a short distance into the child's extended arms and they try to catch it, then finishes with tossing them a ball from a short distance in front. So first thing we need to think about is, what is the developmental purpose? So as we look at our plans and think about what we will accomplish that day, the purpose would be what? Throwing and catching. Well, but we're not putting those together, obviously, due to the age, because putting those two together is very difficult for children. Well, what kind of equipment do we need? So as we pre-class think, we may think, I need a ball. But then do we think, are balls safe? Can they be washed? So what type of a ball do we need? So maybe we think about other things. Do we need to use some natural item or a paper ball that can be thrown away at the end and it doesn't cost a lot? Do we actually need equipment to perform this activity and the motions related to it? These are all questions that need to be asked. Third question is around spacing. So if we want to try to space children for some type of social distancing, what's the spacing between the adult and the child? And what's the spacing between that child and another child? Can this be done individually or whole group? I think probably better off done individually, as to allow for more time and practice, as well as to increase opportunities for smaller groups and individuals. Next slide. This activity is in the hoop. It has children move around the space to music. When the music stops, the children enter the hoop and perform another movement, such as, let's say, bouncing or jumping. So let's think of, again, what's the developmental purpose here? Feel free to chat it up. Locomotor skills, spatial awareness, relationship awareness, these are just a few. What kind of equipment do we need for this activity? Okay, well, basically based on the title, hoops. But do you really need a hoop? Okay, what else could we use? Maybe a carpet square. Maybe draw a circle in the dirt. Maybe just have a space where they go, a colored square on the concrete. So think about, how do we use this equipment and how it could be differently used in other places. So what happens if now they pick the equipment up and throw it? Now could they spread germs in that way? What are the basic considerations for this activity? Well, if we think about it, we probably use a larger space and we separate these hoops and we separate the children. So as they move in general space, staying safely. But then as they come back to their space or hoop, they're in their own personal space without being too close or far, too close to others, but actually far away. Is this better done with a whole group or an individual? This one here is probably done better with a whole group, and we can control their movements a lot more. So we can see that using hoops can be beneficial not only in just child-directed activity, but within an adult-led opportunity as well. All right, next slide and last application. So here we have two similar activities, shelter in place and fort building. Both of them seem self-explanatory, but these are really more child-directed activities. Shelter in place was created to discuss the topic of kind of what's happening in today's world with our children and social distancing and staying at home. But what would be the developmental purpose here? Feel free to put it in the chat box, but maybe things like cooperation, teamwork, muscle strength and endurance, and others. What equipment's used? Here we probably have a lot more variety, a lot more loose parts and non-traditional equipment, as we may call it. This is maybe, again, another place we'd have some concern, sharing of equipment, multiple people touching that equipment. How do we clean equipment like pillows or sheets in a short time? What about the spacing considerations for this activity? How much space are you going to need? Can you have multiple forts or shelters in one place? I think you can. And then lastly, grouping and individual activity. Think about this. Do we group this? Is this a whole class activity? Is this small groups? How do we deal with children spending so much time in one area solving problems, being creative? Think about the distancing, think about the grouping, and think about the sizes. These scenarios are to help you begin to think about the management and instruction you may need to alter to have more of an active experience in a safe and meaningful way in an outdoor learning environment. Next slide. The last two slides are just a few examples to maybe get you started. These can be found on the Be Active Kids website under the resource section. But portable play and loose parts has always been an issue. And it's not just due to COVID-19, but it's due to about how do we manage that? How do we find out what the right quantity, usage, purpose is? And then also now, how do we sanitize and make sure that it's safe? But here you can find several activities in which you can use natural items that can be easily removed or got rid of if somebody's touched, or to traditional equipment that might need to be sanitized and cleaned. Next slide. And last resource, I'd like to thank our program specialists and her colleague, the folks that she worked with to create this one-pager with our friends Discount School Supplies. But here's another resource about outdoor portable play equipment in the time of COVID-19. And in here, you can really determine what equipment is appropriate for what type of actions, whether it's motor skills or health-related fitness components, some tips for using that equipment effectively, and then some of the recommendations and requirements that our good friend Lori Pugh will be speaking about now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Pugh, and I'm with the North Carolina Division of Child Development and Early Education, and I work in the Regulatory Services section. And I wanted to spend a few minutes today to share some information and strategies to help child care providers feel safe and secure when playing outdoors. Next slide. So currently in North Carolina, Governor Cooper has implemented a three-phased approach to slowly lift restrictions while combating COVID-19. We are currently in phase 2. Child care may be fully open, but must continue to meet the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services interim guidelines for child care settings. This guidance was currently updated as of yesterday, June 15th. And the guidance is intended to help licensed and regulated childcare facilities make informed decisions about COVID-19 and minimize the risk of exposure to both the children and staff that are in childcare settings. I have provided a link within the presentation so that you can go to the Division of Child Development and Early Education's website to get the updated interim guidance, as well as there are other COVID-19 resources available. Child care programs are expected to make as much effort as they can to meet all the guidance in this document. However, it is understood that some of these recommendations may not be feasible in all settings, and specific actions should be tailored to each child care program. The Division of Child Development and Early Education is in favor of outdoor play and encourages child care programs to provide outdoor learning activities on a daily basis. Next slide. So let's talk about getting outdoors. We know that social distancing can decrease the spread of COVID-19. As with the indoor setting, it is important for children to try to maintain social distancing during outdoor play, but hopefully it will be much easier to socially distance during outdoor play since you typically have more space to move around. The interim guidance does include information and a link for social distancing strategies for child care facilities to consider. I did pull out a few of those strategies to talk about today so that child care facilities should keep these things in mind when planning their outdoor learning activities. As with indoors, when going outdoors, it is recommended to keep each group of children with their assigned groups throughout the day with the same child care providers. Also, it's recommended that outdoor play equipment should not be shared with multiple groups of children at the same time. Child care programs should discontinue activities that involve bringing together large groups of children or activities that don't allow for social distancing. And child care programs should provide a staggered outdoor play throughout the day to limit the mixing of children. I did want to clarify during this presentation that in Governor Cooper's Executive Order 141, it does say that public playgrounds remain closed, which includes playground equipment located in parks. This does not apply to the outdoor play area and playground equipment located at licensed or regulated child care programs. However, a child care program should check with their local ordinances, because sometimes in some cities or counties, they may have a more stringent requirement. But for the most part, child care programs are allowed to use their play areas and the equipment outside. So now I want to talk about one of these popular summer activities, which is outdoor water play. Next slide, please. So we are in our summer months, and North Carolina has already experienced very hot and humid weather. And as we know, children love to participate in water play. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what we can and cannot do at this time. The updated interim guidance does provide clarification for water play. Outdoor water play using a sprinkler is allowed. Outdoor water play is fine as long as the water is not being collected or contained, and the water must be able to drain quickly to avoid puddling. This does mean that water play using water tables is not allowed at this time. So as child care programs are thinking about water play activities, you want to think about how the water is going to be used. Is it going to be free flowing, contained? Is it can it recirculate, and is it going to drain properly? And that will help you determine whether or not your activity is appropriate at this time. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to talk about ways to keep children and child care providers safe while playing outdoors. The interim guidance does have some specific requirements. There are some requirements and some recommendations. Child care programs are required to follow the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Environmental Health Section guidance for cleaning and disinfection recommendations. There is a link available to this information in the guidance document. Public health officials are advising child care programs to follow the CDC's environmental cleaning and disinfection recommendations guidance to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. Programs are required to use EPA registered disinfectant that is active against coronaviruses. Programs should clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces throughout the day and at night. And remember items that are not ordinarily cleaned daily, such as playground structures. It is recommended that programs use the cleaners typically used at their child care facility. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone that children and staff should be washing their hands after playing outdoors. Next slide. There are some recommendations around cleaning and disinfecting. The outdoor areas require some normal routine cleaning, but there are some things that should not be disinfected. So let's go over a few of these things. Programs should allow time between activities for proper cleaning and disinfection of high-touch surfaces. So think about railings, the grab handles, surfaces that children will touch while they're playing outside. These items should be cleaned and disinfected between groups when possible. Also, clean and sanitize toys at the end of the day. So this includes plastic and metal toys used outside. Programs should not spray disinfectant on outdoor playgrounds. It's not an efficient use of supplies, and it's not proven to reduce the risk of COVID-19. Also, cleaning and disinfection of wooden surfaces. So wooden surfaces such as play structures, benches, tables, natural loose parts, or ground covers like mulch and sand, it's not recommended to clean or disinfect these surfaces. And just remember that toys and other items that cannot be cleaned and sanitized should not be used. So those were some things that I wanted to highlight today. I did see in the chat box that someone was asking about sandbox play. So currently in our guidance document, it does say that water play using water tables and sensory play using rice, beans, sand, or Play-Doh is prohibited at this time. I have requested more information about sandbox play, and we are currently having discussions with the Division of Public Health, Environmental Health, to figure out, if we can recommend and put some criteria and safety measures in place, would it be okay for sandbox play? So I am trying to get more information about outdoor sandboxes. So that concludes my portion of today's discussion. And so I just wanted you to make sure that you visit the Division of Child Development's website for the latest information on COVID-19.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, everybody. So now we are ready for this section of the questions, Q&A. We have several in the Q&A box, and we encourage you to continue sending questions. And if we don't have the time to answer all of them, don't worry, because we will continue working on them and we will answer next time. Of course, Lori, I have more questions for you. Although you have responded some of the ones that were posted in the box, in the Q&A box, there is a question that says, would children be allowed to use bikes? Would a child could share a bike with somebody else?
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think using, equipment that you normally have available is fine. As I mentioned earlier, you may want, if time allows, to, if you have wipes available, to wipe the handlebars as the children switch out. But I think riding a bike is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And I have another one that is, that came from the chat saying, can you verify not using disinfectant on outdoor equipment? I think it was your bullets number 3 in your presentation. It's about disinfecting outdoor equipment. I imagine this is about play equipment.
Oh,
is that correct, Sandy? She asked the question. Let's look at the bullet.
Looking.
Yes, it's a bullet third in your presentation is do not spray disinfectant on outdoor playgrounds. It will be that one.
And what was the question again?
The question is if you could confirm
It is
not using disinfectant on outdoor equipment.
Is it a recommendation? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Those are recommendations from CDC.
Okay. And so I have a question that is about the group size, and this is how many is a large group? Is a class of 24 too many? 24 children too many? To go out with smaller groups? What is a small or a large group here?
So, I mean, it really depends on, you know, the group of the children. So you have to think about how do you have them grouped indoors. So it's really recommended that you have to look at the size of your outdoor play area. So, and it depends on what they're going to participate in. And so you have to plan ahead and think about, it's hard for me to say if 24 is appropriate or not, because it depends on, is that your class size? And is that typically the group that is together? Or are you taking two groups outside that would equal 24?
So Laurie, as a general principle to subdivide a class group, we're thinking 24, which would be a full class, into smaller groups. If you have either additional teachers or classroom assistants or even volunteer parents, that you would subdivide into smaller groups. So there's, well, from the point of view of the children, more diversity of play, but also you're sort of reducing social distancing. I'm not sure that makes really any difference, but you know, if you subdivide and distribute smaller groups, it seems like people are getting more of a choice rather than trying to corral a class of 24 children in one place or one activity. That seems quite a challenge.
Right. I mean, if some programs may be able to do that, depending on how many staff they have available, that they could break them up into smaller groups. And that would be easier to handle.
Okay, so it seems we have a lot of activity here. So there is another question about sensory play, if it is okay if we clean after we have used the objects for sensory play, or sensory play is absolutely banned for now.
Well, currently right now, the only thing I can say is that the interim guidance for childcare settings is prohibiting sensory play. So I feel like as time goes on, there's going to be more discussion about it. And as this participant has said, you know, what if you do use it single use and then you get rid of it in it, or you're able to clean it. But at this point, the agency and the department is saying that it is not allowed at this point.
Some of this depends on what the outcome is relative to exposure to sunlight, I feel, you know, which is pretty strong research that's going on. That would be the natural solution, right? Lay stuff out in the sun for a couple of hours, make sure it gets exposed. Laurie, I noticed a question about pine cones, and I think it raises generally the question about natural objects like pine cones, sticks, stones, you know, other kinds of things that fall off of trees, leaves, and so forth. is there any point of view on that at this point? Because, you know, we're trying to push nature play, and I think many people are kind of iffy about how far they can go with it.
Right. So currently, you know, I think using natural loose parts are okay. And part of my presentation, I did talk about how those are things that cannot be cleaned or sanitized. So I think it is okay to use them. There's nothing that says that you can't, but you just need to be aware if you feel like it's been exposed to a lot of children, or that it might be an item that, you know, may need to be replaced. But we haven't said that you cannot use items that are outside natural items.
Great.
We have time for one or two questions.
Yes, there was a question about where can you get paper balls? And I think that would be directed towards Rich.
That's a good and easy question. So use recycled paper, newspaper, or fresh paper of different weights and crumple it up in a ball. So a good way not to spend a lot of money. You can just go ahead and use what you want for your activity, and then that can go back into the recycle bin and you're good to go. Same things with, you know, what we just talked about with the natural loose parts, you know, use one time and then they can go over the fence or back into a pile where they can sit back in the environment for longer periods of time.
Okay, there's another question about, are we able to do sand and Play-Doh in Ziploc bags if only the child uses it and we dispose after? Lori?
Well, that isn't a creative approach. I, again, can only answer what we have in our guidance document, but I think that probably is a workaround to be able to provide sensory play in a safer way.
Awesome. Okay, to step a little way away from that topic, Nilda or Robin, do you have any recommended resources for in-depth learning about Forest School model?
Okay, so that's a pretty broad topic. What I do to find out what's going on in that area of business is to Google forest schools and keep in touch with what's going on in different countries, because there's a long tradition of forest schools in some European countries. Germany, England has been going for a while. They call them, they have different kinds of protocols related to schools and childcare centers. And then here in North America, United States and Canada, there's been some very good movement forward in the last few years. There are resources there. If you just Google the name, go to Amazon and find out books that are written. We're not particularly expert at NLI in that area of business. We try to keep up to speed with the information. There's an annual conference that's held. And so there's no one resource that I can point to in depth, but there's a lot going on in that field. It's very exciting, lots to learn from. I think it's time for us to draw this to a close. Matt, do we have our last slide? And I'd like to thank our friends and colleagues for stepping up to the plate to put this on, to stay in touch with what the latest thinking is about this new reality of being outdoors, where COVID-19 is still doing its thing. The recording of this webinar will be online in the next few days. And we wish you luck with navigating this. We would also like to thank our network of providers and people on the ground in the trenches there trying to solve these problems that we learn a lot from also. Please stay in touch, send us emails, and keep checking the NLI website, naturallearning.org, to find the latest that we're coming up with in this area of business. So thanks again for your attention. It's great to see so many people interested in this topic and willing to learn and to take it home and try things out. So thanks again. Bye-bye.